What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the MMA Hoodie Fight Predictions and Breakdowns. I'm your host, the MMA Hoodie, and this is technically week 3 of doing fight predictions for me. And I did want to take time to go over and recap the previous week's card. We're not going to do that this week, but I am going to give a shout out to a couple individuals who were right when I said that Clark would win, and they said that Anthony Smith would win. Fast Lenny 69, that's who it was. So shout out to Fast Lenny 69. He was correct in thinking that Anthony Smith would win. Now, I did want to go over and recap that whole card, but honestly, I'm already posting this so late, and I didn't want to add to the whole video and editing and all that, but I will try to do recaps when I can. That being said, I didn't have a great, I didn't lose a bunch of money or anything like that, but my picks were off last week for sure. So I apologize for that, but this week, hopefully we'll have better luck, and we're going to get right into it. So for this card, we have UFC Vegas 16, otherwise known as Hermansson vs. Vettori, which, I don't know how many people Hermansson was supposed to fight before this. But that in itself is a whole other story. As per usual, we're going to get started with the bottom of the card, work our way to the top. So the first fight, is it really a fight? I guess it is a fight. A lot of people don't know this, but Villante is actually a champion of eating donuts. Are you kidding me? A lot of people don't even want to watch this fight. I don't know why we're watching it either, but it's on the card, and thankfully it's just the start of the card. It's not, put on the main card, for example. It is the prelims, and it is the very first fight. So maybe we'll see one of these two guys come in and do some, I don't know, just have an entertaining fight. But for some reason, I doubt it. So we got Villante versus Jake Collier, or Collier, however you want to pronounce it. I say Collier, but I'm also in Canada, so we sort of have that French Canadianness to us. Villante 17-12. He has lost 2 of his last 3 fights, and he's actually lost 3 of his last 5 fights. Jake Collier is 11-5. He has won 2 of his last 5 fights as well. So both of these guys not looking exactly great. And speaking of not looking great, Villante hasn't looked great, in my opinion, at all recently. It was the Maurice Green fight that did it for me, because he should have ended it there. And I don't know if the ref for that was Chris Taioni, but if the ref for that was Chris Taioni, then I don't blame John for that loss. And I've had this conversation with, I believe, FightGame Preux, whose channel you guys should check out as well. And essentially, I feel like Chris Taioni is a horrible ref and sometimes lets the fight go on for too. He's essentially screwed over a lot of fighters who should have gotten a TKO victory, and he's caused them to gas out, in my opinion, and then they end up losing the entire fight down the road. But that's a whole other story. But it is the Maurice Green fight that did it for me. Knowing that John couldn't even get him out. He couldn't finish him, and it just goes to show. And then also the fight IQ level, right? It just goes to show that not only could he not finish Maurice Green, but he didn't have the fight IQ to know not to gas himself out and to also pick his shots. And then he got overwhelmed when he was winning the fight, and he ended up losing. So he went through that entire process and lost the fight. Jake Collier, on the other hand, went in against Tom Aspinall, and so Aspinall is not a joke, so fighting him is one thing, but yeah, he got one punch, essentially hit, knocked out. I don't even think he got to throw a punch in that entire fight. So he's not looking too great either, but at least he's not looking good against good competition. I don't consider Maurice Green good competition. And Villante looks like the guy who just doesn't give a shit anymore. Straight up, just doesn't care. He's essentially there for a paycheck. To be quite honest, that whole sort of Chris Weidman camp, in my opinion, is overrated. Those New York guys, they've kind of lost their magic touch. As far as comparing these two guys, they've got the same height, but roughly the same reach. I mean, Jake's got a little bit more reach than John does. So the hard part here is that John is the favorite, and I believe he's the favorite at plus 200, if I'm not mistaken, or sorry, minus 200. And Jake Collier is at plus 165. Now, which way will this fight go? I could have said John had the knockout power to take out Jake, and I would have had he taken out Maurice Green, but he didn't. So on the latter side of that is Jake Collier's chin, up to par after what we saw happen with Tom Aspinall. So on one hand, I kind of believe John could get a knockout here, but on the other, I don't at the same time. He hasn't really been performing well. He's not really that efficient, but if he can beat somebody, it would be Jake. Let's be honest, right? He seems to always kind of come in. He's got that kind of pattern of inconsistency as far as winning and even losing. He's an inconsistent loser just as much as he is an inconsistent winner. I'm not confident in either of these fighters. Both of these guys can win, but both of them can lose just as much. Betting on something like this, like a fight like this, I think is a lost cause. If you are going to bet money on this, I would just put it on Jake. He could get lucky. And maybe it's more than luck, but John's probably got the slight edge for sure, but John's just significantly looked worse and worse as he's fought recently. So I don't know. I kind of expect Jake to maybe come in here off of that loss with Tom or with Aspinall and kind of be looking to, make an impression again. John might not expect that, and then suddenly he's in for a lot of pressure from Jake. And maybe Jake takes over the fight after John gasses out in the first 30 seconds, because that's what happens. He gasses out so quick. So I'm going to go with Jake Collier, but I wouldn't bet on this fight. I would stay away from it. Okay, next fight up. Damon Jackson versus Ilia Topuria. Both of these guys have looked good. I watched Damon Jackson's fight. Let's start with him because he actually really impressed me. He kind of looks like the guy who shouldn't be winning as much as he does or look as good as he does. For some reason, he looks old and he kind of looks like he's past his prime, but really it seems like he's just doing well and getting better and better. I mean, he's only lost one fight in probably his last 10 fights, I assume. So of his last 8 fights, he's lost 1. Of his last 9 fights, he's lost 2, though. But throughout his career, he's only had 4 losses. And the guy has fought, and they're few and far between. So usually he'll win 3 or 4 fights, and then he'll lose one. His last fight was against Mirsad Bektik, and he won via guillotine choke. And that was his first fight in the UFC. It was in a UFC fight night, and that was this year as well. And then he fought again, or he's fighting again now. This is going to be his second fight in the UFC, so he's still kind of fresh in the UFC, but he's fairly old. I mean, 32? So, not that he's on his way out, but he's either in his prime or starting to go past his prime, right? But the way he fights is pretty amazing. He often wins by submission. He looks for a submission in any position possible. So one of the things that I guess Ilya has to be aware of is making sure that this guy isn't able to get a submission. Because if he grabs your leg, he will look for it. If he grabs your arm, he's going to look for it. It's going to be a constant battle as far as a defensive issue for Topuria. I could see that being the number one issue for Topuria, to be quite honest. Now, he might be able to defend against Topuria's jiu-jitsu. I think actually that realm of things is actually closer than a lot of people maybe predict. Damon Jackson is pretty damn good, whether it be sort of standing. He does kind of bring a little bit of pressure, but he's very patient. He's very patient in the way that he moves in and moves forward. He does have a bit of a height and reach advantage as well, so he can make use of that through leg kicks and just throwing out the jabs as Topuria maybe tries to come in. Now, on the other side, Topuria is a good fighter himself, and he proved that to me when he had his most recent fight. against Youssef Zalal, which, I was pretty high on Youssef Zalal. I think I bet Zalal in that fight and lost some cash. I was shocked at the win on that, but Topuria really showed his skills. He really showed what he was about. And to be quite honest, the funny thing about Zalal is the fight he had previous to that, I actually kind of got worried because I saw there were some holes in his game and some spots where he was definitely having issues. And I think Topuria realized that as well, came in with a solid game plan and got rid of him. And that's why here, I think Topuria is going to win. I think he comes in with a solid game plan. So when it comes down to even comparing the two, I think it's a close fight. But I think the one that's going to come in with the better game plan is the one that's going to win. He's got jiu-jitsu. He's got good wrestling. He obviously recently beat Youssef Zalal, which is huge. Unless Youssef Zalal was just hype. But, in my opinion, we saw his skill and he looked pretty damn good. But he does, once again, have the chance of being submitted. At the same time, he can be the one to submit. So he does have quick fights as well. I mean, if you look at his history, it's all like ending in round 1, round 2 victories. He's never lost, so that's another thing to consider. So for this fight, based on all those factors, I'm going with Topuria without a doubt. Okay, next fight, Jimmy Flick versus Cody Durden. Let's start with Jimmy Flick. He's 15-5-0. He is the minus 170 slight favorite here in this fight. And he recently fought Nate Smith in the Contender Series. So this upcoming fight with Cody Durden is actually his first fight into the UFC. Now, as far as Jimmy Flick goes, I watched that Nate Smith fight, and I was actually surprised with his performance. He's had a lot of methods to victory, and if you watch my previous videos, you know that I like people who mix it up and have different ways to win. It's great if you've got a guy who can knock you out right away over and over and over again, but if that's the only tool they have, they're eventually going to get, expose themselves to the higher caliber fighters. So for Jimmy Flick, he has been beat by strikes before mainly. Now, if Flick can get this to the ground, he can dominate the fight. I believe that. I truly believe that against Cody Durden. I think Flick could dominate if the fight does hit the ground. He does have a lot of submission wins, but surprisingly no KO wins. So I don't expect Flick to get a knockout here at all, right? Now, the interesting thing about Durden is that he's on a 7-fight win streak. But at the same time, this guy used to be bantamweight, and I believe he's going down a weight class. So is that going to be a problem for him? Because I don't think he's ever won at 125. The thing about Durden is that he's lost twice by rear naked choke. And if you go look at Flick's wins, a lot of them are by like arm triangle choke or just choke in general or a submission. Understanding that Cody Durden, I guess, is moving down a weight class. And although he is a good wrestler and has various ways to win and is on a 7-fight win streak, he's going to have to avoid the grappling. He's going to have to avoid the submission. As the fight goes on, Cody Durden could just start to tire out a lot quicker than Jimmy Flick. I understand Jimmy Flick, compared to Cody Durden right now, if you look at their record, you'd probably expect me to say that Cody Durden has the better chance to win. But in my opinion, in this fight, Jimmy Flick has more opportunities to win. And so for that fact, in this fight, I'm picking Jimmy Flick to win the fight. I'm going to say by submission. Okay, so Matt Wiman, 16-9-0. He's lost 2 of his last 3 fights. And he's lost 3 of his last 5 fights. Whereas his opponent, Jordan Leavitt, has won 5 of his last 5 fights. Actually, he's 7-0, so he's won 7 of his last fights. He is, I guess, on a 7-fight win streak. Jordan Leavitt is. Matt Wiman is not. So in this fight, we see Matt, once again, a guy who's won in various ways. He doesn't have any real advantage in this fight, though. And if you look at his record, the poor guy, I didn't realize this until I looked at it, but it looks like the poor guy hasn't won a fight since 2014. And before that, he hadn't won since 2012. So here's my issue is, where the hell was this guy for the past, 5 years before he came back in 2019 and lost twice, once to Luis Pena, once to Joe Solecki. I don't feel comfortable with Matt Wiman already. Just like, even if I didn't know Matt as a fighter, I wouldn't feel comfortable now looking at just what's going on with his record. Now we go to Jordan Leavitt, because here's the thing. He's obviously, in some way, shape, or form, the better fighter with the better record. But my issue here is that he has not fought in the UFC yet. Another issue that I have is that he's only had 7 fights. He's 25 years old. Matt Wiman's been in with competition that is maybe tougher. He maybe hasn't fought in a very long time, but does his experience go as far as getting him the win? And you look at the odds here, Jordan is like a heavy favorite. So clearly even the odds makers think Jordan's going to win this fight. When he's undefeated and he's got that submission experience, he's young and hungry. It's his UFC debut. He's probably going to go in there really chasing the win. He does have a little bit of a reach advantage, but will that make a difference? Probably not in this fight. He's a younger fighter fighting. Okay, so he's like 25. Well, Wiman's 37? The only thing that you could lean to Wiman over Leavitt in this fight is the fight IQ. Leavitt being the newer fighter, he probably has a lower fight IQ. He might be more prone to gassing out or opening himself up somehow. However, I don't have faith in a guy like Matt Wiman, who he himself hasn't fought in so long, and then recently when he has fought, he's lost both his fights. He's also getting older. I think he's kind of lost touch with having the passion to fight, and now it's just about making the money. So for that fact, I'm going to go with Jordan Leavitt for this fight. And looking at his record, 7 wins. A lot of them are by chokes or submissions. So I'm going to say Jordan Leavitt by submission in the second round. Luis Smoka versus Jose Alberto Quinonez. Smoka is sitting at 16-7-0. Jose is sitting at 8-4-0. This is another prelim fight. Now we look at the odds right now. They're sitting at -135 for Smoka as the slight favorite, and +115 for Quinonez as the underdog. Now, both of these guys lost their last fight. They both also won the fight previous to that, and they both also lost the fight previous to that fight. And the funny part is they both won both the fights after that. So they've had a very similar record. Smolka's ranked number 39 bantamweight worldwide, and Jose Alberto Quinonez is sitting at number 36. So they're only like 3 spots apart from each other, which tells me that this is going to be a fairly close fight, as the odds are slightly in Smolka's favor. I don't believe that necessarily he has the better chance of winning. We know that he has had issues in the past. At the same time, he has looked kind of decent recently. And, he was sort of removed from the UFC and then came back, the very important part. So recently he lost to Casey Kenyon. I mean, Casey himself has looked pretty decent. Before that, he beat Ryan McDonald. Ryan McDonald is okay. Matt Schnell, he lost to Matt Schnell, and I can't say that Matt Schnell is exactly the best fighter, but he did lose by triangle choke. So that's something to consider. But the funny thing is, he beat Sue Mutajiri, and recently we saw Sue come out, and Sue played some fancy game last week. So He's beat some good opponents, but he's also lost to some slightly, I don't know, not average, but slightly underappreciated opponents, I could say. Now, we got to remember that this fight was set up a few weeks ago, except Smoka couldn't make the weight or was sick, or both, for all I know. And now, this is 2 or 3 weeks later, we're going about having the same fight. A lot of people aren't sure how this is going to affect Smoka because he would have had to cut weight twice. But, at the same time, wouldn't Quinonez would have to do the same? So I don't understand the logic there, but maybe I'm just missing something as far as that goes. And I mean, Quinonez, he recently lost to Sean O'Malley, right? And I could see him most likely winning this by decision. I have never really been overly impressed with Quinonez, although he looks like he has a lot of potential all the time. I don't know why his fights just seem lackluster to me. Maybe I'm the only one, but if you guys feel the same way, comment down below. Just let me know what you guys think about the way Quinonez fights, because I feel like this guy, I think we actually saw him come up at the same time as Marlon Vera as well. And Benitez, weren't they all on The Ultimate Fighter, I believe, together? So keeping that in mind, I always thought Quinonez would elevate just as Marlon Chito Vera did, and he seemed to just be, I guess, plateaued or stale. Like, his fights are all just lackluster in my mind. So that being said, I mean, you go back and forth between Smoka's weight cut issue and his past experience in the UFC not being so great, then coming back and I guess doing decent. He's not doing horrible. He's been consistent as far as the amount of fights he's had, so you can keep that into consideration. But here, a lot of people, I would say, are probably on Smoka as the slight favorite. In this case, though, I'm going to give it to Quinonez. I'm going to give him the shot. I think he has what it takes to beat Smoka, and I think if he plays a smart game, he can get it done. But this is no bet for me. I wouldn't bet on this. It's just too many variables, and it's too close to call, in my opinion. I don't have a decent read on this, so maybe that's why I'm kind of hesitant. But if you have a really good read and you think Smoka is going to win or Quinonez is going to win, then by all means, make your bet. But for me, I don't think I would bet this fight. So next fight we got is apparently the start of the main card. Movsar Evloev versus Nate Landwehr. So Movsar is at a 13-0 perfect win streak, and we got Nate Landwehr at a 14-3. Don't let that deceive you, because he's only had one loss recently. However, the weird part about this whole fight is the odds. Don't get me wrong, Movsar Evloev is definitely a skilled fighter, but at minus 650 and at a plus 465 for someone like late Landwehr. I mean, this guy is someone who I believe is slightly underrated. He comes in, he shows up when he does win. If you look at his loss, as well, he's had more than one, but if you look at his loss, it was to Herbert Burns. Okay, so, and then after that, he fought Darren Elkins, and he beat Darren Elkins, and, Darren Elkins has a lot more fights than this guy does, and I mean, the hard part is that he lost to Herbert Burns in the first round, but all of his other fights, they've all been wins, except for, a couple, which one went to the decision, and the other two ended early in the first and second round. He has been consistent. He's already fought twice in 2020. He fought once in 2019, though. 2018, he fought twice again. So this guy who fights at least twice a year, if not at least once a year, this is going to be his third fight for 2020. So obviously he's getting more consistent. He's hungry to get over that loss that he had 2 fights ago. He had a fight that was supposed to come up against Shane Young that got canceled. And I think, here we go, back on the value picks. I think when you get to any fighter, and I'll take this back to Shevchenko, I'll take this back to the last Shevchenko fight. I said, hey, don't put Maria out because she might be able to bring it. The odds are way too high on Shevchenko. This is MMA. It's women's MMA. Anything can happen. So when the odds are that far swayed and the other person has potential, I always see a value bet. And in this case, I do see a value bet on Nate Landwehr. Do I think he will win against Movsar? I think Movsar is more talented, but I think Nate has just as much a chance to win as Movsar does. And I'm shocked that the odds are so wide. If you believe in Nate, then give him a shot. I do believe Movsar does win, but that plus 450 for Nate looks a little tempting. I'm going to wait until both the weigh-ins, as well as I'm going to wait for them to walk out to the cage. And when that happens, I might place a bet on Nate Landwehr if it's still just as wide. So maybe you might want to look for that too, or look to place a bet during the fight, as the first round sort of starts. Then you could do that and see how Nate is doing against Movsar, and just be quick on your trigger to get that bet in. So yeah, my final decision on this fight. Actually, maybe I should go into the fight a bit more than just hyping up Nate here. Let's get into Movsar, because he is also a beast in his own sense. 13-0 is not a bad streak at all, right? But what? 3 of those fights have been in the UFC. 10 of them have not. Who has he fought? Not exactly people that are well skilled or well known, maybe, but he has done it. In the first round, in the second round, head kick, rear naked choke, punches. The guy has so many different ways to win. He's even won by decision, unanimous decision. And I like a guy who could win by all those various ways. In fact, I prefer a guy who has knockouts on his record, but also has some decision wins, because it shows to me that they could go the distance if it has to go down that road. And Movsar, he's just got this technical way about him where he has pressure, he's got power, but he doesn't look it. When he throws his punches and kicks, they look very smooth, but they also look light. They're not. They're nice power shots. He does a great job of striking, and he's constantly improving. You see this with the 13-0 record clearly. The guy has good fight IQ. He is a legitimate threat to the division, I would say. But so is Nate. He's had some losses against, as I mentioned, Herbert Burns, but he is the value pick here. And the problem is that Nate has very high pressure, and he kind of throws these wide hook punches, and he comes in brawls almost, but with a bit more of a technical sense. So I don't know if Movsar is going to collapse under that pressure, or if he's going to be able to keep him at a distance. I think Movsar is going to have to start using kicks quick and kind of moving back fast into the side movement as well, to sort of avoid getting stuck against the cage or having Nate Landwehr get on top of him and start brawling him. Because if Nate lands 2 or 3 of those punches as he's moving in, and he will be willing to move in to land those, it's going to be a problem for Movsar, and I could see Nate ending it if it comes down to that. But I also see that as the only way that Nate will win. Otherwise Movsar is going to pick him apart and eventually take over the fight, and he will win by decision or some sort of head kick knockout or whatnot. If I had to make a pick here, I'm going to go with Evloev. I don't think the bet is worth it. As I said, I might bet on Nate Landwehr here. I'm going to give Evloev by decision. All right, next fight on our main card is Roman Dolidze versus Allan. Apparently it's Allan. I want to say Allan. Okay, and Dolidze is a favorite at minus 210, while Allan is sitting at a plus 175 underdog. Apparently Allan tested positive recently for, PEDs or steroids or something. His fight against Mike Rodriguez was a no contest. Essentially, it didn't count because he was on steroids or some form of PEDs, I suppose. Before that, he fought Alexander Silva, Vinicius de Moreira, and he beat Alexander, but he lost against Vinicius. Now, neither of these fights were in the UFC. In fact, if his first fight in the UFC didn't count, his second fight in the UFC was supposed to be against Ed Herman. That got canceled. And now he's fighting Roman Dolidze, which is a huge, huge mistake. As your second fight in the UFC after you've come off PEDs, you are going to fight Dolidze. Now, mind you, Dolidze has apparently had his own problems in the past with these PEDs, bullshit steroid stuff. Palm pills or whatever the hell he's doing. I don't know all the stuff that they take. I don't look in too deep into that stuff. But essentially, both of these guys have essentially at some point tested positive for something. But the difference is Roman Dolidze didn't do it in his last fight. And Roman Dolidze hasn't been out for over a year. Well, actually, that's not true. He has. Because he fought his last fight in 2018. Then he had a bunch of fights that were canceled. All of those in 2019 and 2020. And I believe one of those or two of them maybe were due to COVID. I believe it was actually the Khadis Ibragimov got canceled due to some sort of COVID thing. But then he fought Khadis anyway, and he beat him a couple weeks later. So I guess it was due to COVID, and then they ended up fighting, and he ended up beating Khadis, and Khadis is a good fighter himself. I don't see this being a problem for Roman, to be quite honest. And the odds were what? Minus 188 and plus 162? Oh, they're much lower now. They started out a little closer together. Dolidze is at a minus 210. If you really feel confident in him and another fighter, maybe parlay them and try to get the most of your money. And if you feel confident with minus 210, you could take Dolidze. I mean, think the guy's undefeated. He's had more recent fights. He's not coming off PEDs or any steroids. John Allan is. He's won 7 in a row. What else can be said? I'm going with Roman Dolidze here to beat John Allan. Heck, I'll give it to him by KO too. Let me see. I don't even think this fight's going to go to the distance because all of Roman's fights have been finishes. They haven't gone the distance. Subs and KOs. Spinning back fist. Punches. Rear naked choke. Heel hook. This guy has won in every every facet you could imagine. So I don't expect this to go to the finish regardless. I give it to Roman Dolidze by, let's just say TKO in the second round. So there's only one way that De La Rosa is going to win. If she could take Santos down. That's it. That's her only chance. And if she does, then she has a good chance of winning. So don't underestimate De La Rosa. You can underestimate her standing against Talia Santos. I have no problem with that. But if she gets Santos down and Santos is unable to get up, she's going to be a problem for Santos. And she's probably going to win the fight by decision. Or, heck, she could win by submission because she's won 8 fights by submission. And I think she's won her last 4 of 5 fights. That being said, though, she's not fighting the most impressive fighters, okay? So I got to give that edge to Santos. Santos is really, I guess, fighting the better fighter in general. And actually, speaking of Santos fighting other fighters, she was supposed to fight someone else originally. But that didn't happen, and now she's fighting De La Rosa. She's won 10 fights by KO, though. That's huge. And 11 of her 16 wins ended in the first round. Scary. So if I'm De La Rosa, I'm looking to do one thing. What's that? Yeah, take Santos down. That's your only shot, girl. So the thing about Santos is she's won 3 of her last 5 recent fights. So she does have holes in her game. But I don't know if Montana could actually expose those holes. Once again, we see when they'll start fighting if De La Rosa could take her down and keep her down. If you're interested in betting this fight, but you're unsure, just like I am, I would wait for the first round to start and see how Santos does on those on the defense, the takedown defense, or if De La Rosa even shoots at all. Who knows? She might play it crazy and actually stand with Santos, which wouldn't be a good move. If you're looking to place a bet before the fight starts, I would roll with Santos. I believe that she will win. I wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't get the knockout, seeing as a lot of her fights recently have just ended in the first round. I don't expect this to go to the decision if Santos wins, but I do expect it to go to the decision if De La Rosa wins. That being said, I'm going to roll with Santos by knockout in the third round. I think she slowly picks her apart and then eventually in the third round gets a TKO. On to the next fight, Justin Jaynes versus Gabriel Benitez, another one of the Ultimate Fighter. I think it was South America or something. Gabriel Benitez was part of that, I believe. Justin Jaynes, who we've seen actually fight a couple times recently, I believe 2 of his first UFC fights. The first one he did great. He fought Frank Camacho and he actually knocked him out in 41 seconds of the first round and looked very impressive. But then he fought Gavin Tucker, and I mean, he lost via rear naked choke in the third round. He gassed out over time. He was really looking for that knockout win again. He could have maybe achieved that against Gavin Tucker, but that's a little far-fetched, right? It's hard to assume you're going to be able to do that to all the guys that are already in the UFC. It's one thing to do it when you're on your way in the door. It's another thing to do it once you're inside and you're slowly working your way up. That wasn't Gavin Tucker's first rear naked choke. It was actually his second rear naked choke back-to-back. He had done that against Seungwoo Choi as well. So, Justin Jaynes, you figure would have been ready for that, or would have seen that as part of Gavin Tucker's game. And apparently he didn't see that, even though it had happened in the fight previous to their fight. So that kind of gives me a bad impression of Justin Jaynes' fight IQ and probably even his coaching. Maybe he got caught in that situation and just wasn't ready for it. But in my opinion, if the fighter that you're fighting submits you the same way they submitted someone in their previous fight, then that's a problem, because that's something you should have expected and you clearly didn't see. But don't get me wrong, Benitez, I mean, he hasn't exactly excelled in the UFC either. Although he's had many fights, 21 wins, 8 losses, his record isn't bad. It's just that recently he's had 2 losses, and he's only won 2 of his last 5 fights. He essentially lost 1, then won 2, then lost 2. Whereas Justin Jaynes, he's won 4 of his last 5. It's just his very last fight that he lost. But there's sort of this barrier that you see, and that's that Justin Jaynes started losing as soon as he came into the UFC. And I don't mean right when he came into the UFC. He beat Frank Camacho, I understand that. But his second fight he lost, and he didn't lose it in high fashion. Of course, he went to the third round. The fight was almost over. But he did eventually just, his fight IQ level, once again, played a factor. He gassed himself out. It's not that his opponent beat him, it's that his own game plan beat himself. He can't let that happen here with Benitez. Now I have a feeling that Benitez is going to draw him out. I wouldn't be surprised. Watch it. Benitez is not going to let out too many punches in the first round. I promise you he'll be more on the defensive. He's going to hope that Justin Jaynes throws the pressure and keeps doing that. You're going to see Benitez be very quiet in the first round and be more on the defensive for sure. I can almost guarantee you that will be his game plan. Coming into the second and the third, as Jaynes gets more tired from throwing those fast, heavy punches, Benitez will capitalize by throwing in some kicks and then finally going in with punches and maybe even submitting Jaynes himself after Jaynes kind of gets tired out. I hope here Jaynes kind of comes in with a bit better of a fight IQ and mindset of conserving his gas. Who knows if he knows Benitez's game plan? I have a feeling that I do know his game plan. That being said, I'm giving the fight to Gabriel Benitez because I'm relying on the fact that Benitez and his team knows what to predict from Jaynes better than Jaynes and his team can predict what to expect from Benitez. So once again, look for Benitez to kind of not overexert himself in the first round and allow Jaynes to bring in some pressure and throw some punches, and he's going to be more on the defensive, and then he's going to slowly try to take it over in the second and third, unless he lands a lucky shot. So my final prediction will be Gabriel Benitez by decision, or no. Let's say by third round TKO after Jaynes gasses out. All right, we're at the co-main event. Ovin Preux versus Jamahal Hill. But guys, before we get into the co-main event, I just want to give you guys a quick thank you and shout out for taking the time to watch the channel, watch the videos. Those of you who tuned in last week and commented, I really appreciate it. I know a lot of you are from the Gambling Addicts crew. Always cool to see other people giving me shout outs and pumping my channel with me as well. So another thing that I'd appreciate is if you guys hit the subscribe button. That'll really help me a lot. I've got some goals set as far as the channel goes. One of them right now is to get to my first 100 subscribers. I would love to do that by the time this weekend is over. So you guys can help me do that just by hitting that subscribe button. And if you want to stay on top of all my videos, be sure to hit that notification bell as well. Another thing that really helps me is if you tap that like button. That would be of great assistance and help. I do these videos out of love. I'm never going to ask you to pay me money for anything. I just do this because it's a hobby of mine and I just enjoy it. And I got to give an extra shout out again to Leighton from UFC Gambling Addicts, as well as FightGame Pro, who I haven't heard from FightGame Pro in a couple weeks. I'm starting to get, I don't know what's going on there, but hopefully he posts a video this week or next week. I assume he's getting busy. But I really got to give it up to those two guys who encouraged me to start this channel. I used to just watch these kinds of videos and specifically their channels, and through conversation and just through making predictions, those two guys kind of encouraged me that maybe I should start making videos too. So that's what I'm doing now, and any help and any support from you guys is much appreciated. That being said, let's get into the co-main event of the evening. Ovin Preux versus Jamahal Hill. Ovin's coming in at 25-14-0. Jamahal Hill coming in at 8-0-0. A lot of people high on Jamahal, so much so that he is a minus 180 favorite at the moment. And Ovin is at a plus 150 slight underdog here. Now, Hill has won 8 of his last 8 fights clearly. Whereas Ovin Preux has won his last fight, but in his last 5, he's only 2-5. So a lot of people are high on this kid, Jamahal. He's had 2 fights in the UFC and 1 fight on the Contender Series. He won all 3 of those fights. 2 of those fights were stopped early, and 1 of them went to decision, to unanimous decision. But to be quite honest, looking at the people he has fought, well, I'm not surprised. Daquan Townsend. I mean, just that name on your record alone is like, it's worse to have a win against Daquan Townsend than actually fighting him at all and losing or something. Like, just don't fight Daquan Townsend if you want people to take you seriously as a fighter. So a lot of these guys that he's fought, I'm not shocked that he has beat. I feel like a lot of fighters set themselves up for perfection. Like, I'm going to fight that guy because I know I could beat him easily. And that's what Hill has done throughout his career so far. The other thing to keep in mind, this kid's still young. Like, he's new into the fight game. He's 29 years old. You know, he's got an 8 or 9 fight win streak. I don't know, because right now it says he's got 9 wins, but he's only got 8 wins in his pro MMA record. So make up your mind, Tapology. Which one is it? And going up against a guy like Ovince St. Preux, like, don't get me wrong, yeah, Ovince hasn't had exactly the most lustrous, awesome record, especially as of recent. He's lost a lot of his recent fights, but he won his last fight against Alonzo Menafield, and a lot of people were high, including myself, on Alonzo Menafield, and Menafield was 9-0, right? So, do you see where I'm going with this? But at the same time, St. Preux has lost against people like Ben Rothwell. Not to say Ben Rothwell is a horrible fighter, but like he never made it to the echelon at the top, right? And then another thing that really irritates me here, or it doesn't irritate me, but it's a bit of an alarm. And a lot of people are underestimating this factor, so I want you guys to be careful. According to Tapology, Hill is ranked number 24. And Ovince St. Preux is ranked number 16. For a guy who's only had 8 wins, 2 fights in the UFC, man, jumping that high between ranks, like there's levels. We all know this. You're passing guys, like no offense to, Shogun's not great right now, but you're passing guys like Shogun, Ion Kutelaba, Nemkov. You're passing all these guys. You're not even fighting those guys to get to a top 16 guy, Ovince St. Preux. The guy like next up from Ovince St. Preux is like Ryan Spann. So man, I don't know if Hill is the right pick here, guys. I really don't think that this is a smart move to hype up on Hill. Now, will Hill win? Yeah, of course he has a chance. He's doing well. He's got 8 wins. Is it likely against a guy like Ovince St. Preux? And I don't think it is. And I'm not a fan of Ovince St. Preux. I'm really not. I might not even bet this fight, but I kind of want to now. I'm going to wait to see what they look like when they come out to the ring or to the octagon. And if Ovince looks good and if Jamahal kind of looks like he's a little antsy or a little nervous, then I might put a bet on St. Preux. So for this fight, I'm going to go Ovince St. Preux. Ovince does have 11 wins by knockout and 9 by submission. I feel like he's got to maybe press Hill up against the cage and use the ground game if he can. Both of these guys also fought earlier this year, so you should keep that in mind. I think Hill is going to look for the KO. OSP could also look for a KO. But this is a huge jump in competition for Hill. Although he has more pressure in his offensive game, I'm going to give this one to St. Preux based on experience. I just got to go with St. Preux on this. So I give it to Ovince St. Preux I'm just going to say by decision, but forget the method of victory. Just Ovince St. Preux wins. All right, guys, this is the main event of the evening. I'm super excited for this fight, specifically Jack Hermansson versus Marvin Vettori. This fight has switched, I think like it's been like 25,000 times now. I think Jack Hermansson was originally supposed to fight Hulk Hogan, and then it switched to Randy Savage, but then they found out he died. So then they switched it to, Bret Hart, and then he couldn't do it. So then they switched this fight so many times. It's okay, though, because we got a great fight happening now. Jack Hermansson versus Marvin Vettori. Jack coming in at 21-5-0. Marvin Vettori coming in 15-3-1. Now, as everybody else is probably commenting, some people are questioning the fact that Vettori is the slight favorite. Right now, he's sitting at minus 145, and Jack Hermansson sitting at plus 120. I myself don't understand this. Some people think the odds makers have this wrong. Other people think, no, this is perfectly on the spot. I'm going to tell you why the odds makers have this sitting in this fashion. We're going to start with Jack Hermansson's record, and then we're going to go to Marvin Vettori, but this has to do a huge part of why why Vettori is the favorite right now. So Hermansson beat Kelvin Gastelum last, but before that he lost against Jared Cannonier, right? Keep that in mind. Before that, he did great. He won 4 or 5 fights before that, and I think his last loss previous to that was probably Thiago Santos. The problem comes with the Cannonier loss. Because what happened after that fight was Jared Cannonier lost his next fight to Robert Whittaker. Now, why does this matter? Because Jack Hermansson lost against somebody who then lost again, which sort of puts Jack Hermansson on a bit more of a bad look. I know this sounds a little weird, but this is exactly what these odd makers, these are the slight adjustments that the odd makers will look for in a tight race here, or a tight fight like we have right here. Now, the interesting thing about that whole situation is I would love to see Jack Hermansson win here and then fight Robert Whittaker. And I would like to see who wins that fight. I'd predict I don't know who I'd predict. I'd have to kind of like review tape and kind of go over everything. But I think that would be an interesting fight as well. So for that fact, I hope Jack Hermansson beats Marvin Vettori here. And I honestly think he will. And I'm going to tell you why. Okay, so right off the bat, Hermansson has a 3.5-inch reach advantage. He's going to use that to keep Marvin Vettori at a distance. He's going to throw those jabs, maybe feint a bit, leg kicks, whatever he's got to do. He's the more tall, lankier fighter, so he's going to have reach and height either way. This guy has 11 wins by knockout and 6 by submission. So although I know Vettori will push the pace and bring the pressure and is a bit more of a fast-paced fighter, Jack Hermansson is going to be able to keep up with that pace. And then not only is he going to do that, he's going to have the advantage in being able to actually maintain and sustain his energy throughout the fight, whereas Vettori is not going to be able to do that. Vettori being the wider, sort of thicker fighter, I think even though they're roughly the same weight, like I think Vettori carries more, if that makes sense. And I have a feeling that that's going to play a factor in Vettori maybe gassing out if this goes on in the later rounds. Vettori's also got to look out for a lot of things, like the submissions. If these guys get into a grappling exchange and suddenly Jack goes to grab a submission, well, like now Vettori has no chance but to actually like separate himself. And the one thing is that Vettori will probably want to bring this fight to get closer to Jack so that he could throw those power punches and overwhelm Jack. The problem is I don't think Jack gets overwhelmed even when he's being overwhelmed. He just learns how to use his submission game so well in these kinds of fights. And a lot of people think that this is a perfect matchup for Vettori. And I honestly don't think so. I think Hermansson is going to show Vettori that he's got a lot of holes in his game. And I mean, remember, Vettori has gone to a lot of decisions in his recent fights. Hermansson had a decision win against Souza, but that was recently. But between that time, before that time, after that time, he hasn't had a decision win since 2016. And every single one of his wins since that time has all been the fight hasn't gone the distance. A lot of his wins happen in the first round. It's usually a choke or ground and pound. So in this fight, I would pick Jack Hermansson to win in the first round by TKO or maybe even a submission. Take your pick. But I wouldn't even pick a method of victory. I would just say Hermansson wins. And honestly, shocked at the odds. Shocked at the odds. Maybe I'm missing something here, but the only thing that I could pinpoint the difference between why Vettori is up and is actually a favorite in the fight is simply because of the Cannonier loss recently for Hermansson. But really, I feel like Hermansson's fought the better fighters. I feel like he's had the better experience. All I could hear about Marvin Vettori is that, he lost by split decision against Israel Adesanya. It doesn't matter. First of all, that was Israel Adesanya in 2018. And second of all, that was still, he lost by split decision. It's not that he was winning the fight, like overly winning the fight. It's just that it was a split decision. I think anybody looking at the fight would agree that Adesanya won. He just didn't win the judges over completely. So really, like, don't look at that Adesanya fight and tell me that Marvin Vettori, has a chance, because he almost won against Israel Adesanya. He didn't almost win against Israel Adesanya. So that being said, Jack Hermansson, round one. Let's go round one, choke, just because I've seen that a lot. But I don't like giving methods of victory. So just once again, Jack Hermansson for the win. All right, guys, that's the end of this episode. And man, I'm doing these episodes only audio right now. It's a lot of work. Like, I put a lot of work and effort into it, obviously, as you could see with all the slides and the intro video and all that jazz. And this week it was another late week. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm just getting into the groove of things. So hopefully as the episodes progress and things get better and I have more time, I will be able to do full videos or put myself on screen, all that jazz. I do have plans to continue this channel for the long term. So please do me a solid. If you like the content, if you enjoyed my breakdown, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, because that also helps me. And I will see you guys next week. We will try to do a recap for next week's video of this week's fights. So that's the plan, is that we start every full video with a recap from the week before, and then we get into the full video. The problem is I'm trying to make these videos not so long. So as we go, I'm going to try to be more brief. I'd like to make them... Oh, my dog kind of just like coughed up. As the weeks move forward and I'm able to finesse things more, you'll probably see the videos be roughly 30 to 40 minutes long. And I'd like to keep it that way. So that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for the support. We will catch you next time. I am the MMA Hoodie, and this is my fight predictions for UFC Vegas 16. Peace out.